This is Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Here are your hosts, Dr. Tim Slecker and Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, educated educators talking education.
Yes, there it is. It's Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk, educated educators talking education. Johnny Lupinacci, maybe jump in and join us, but he's preoccupied. He's got those other things. But Jess, you're here. It's me and
I'm
you.
here.
And I think we can handle this.
I think so. And I think that we have a wonderful class that is ready to get into session.
Yeah, in fact, today we're honored to welcome a powerhouse in public education and true champion for Wisconsin students, Dr. Jill Underly, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, over 25 years of experience spanning every corner of public education, from teaching to administrating to shaping statewide policy. Dr. Underly has dedicated her career to ensuring every child has access to a first-class public education. And I have to say, welcome back to Busted Pencils, Dr. Jill Underly. How are you, Jill?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here.
See that? I said we remember that it was when you were actually campaigning to running for the state superintendent position when we had you on Busted Pencils. It was an interesting time, COVID and all those things. So again, really happy to have you back. And in fact, here, the reality of, a pretty big announcement that we want to put forward. I know there's been some news, some Wisconsin Examiner and some things going on. But the request for the budget, historic request here. And I wonder, though, too, before we actually talk about, the request, the reality here that we've talked about, multiple times on Busted Pencils with different experts, the reality of the divestment that has occurred historically over the years, and the reality that, there have been, for schools to get the funding they need, the resorting of going to referendum.
Right.
Because of the legislature's irresponsibility. And just, the fact here too, even this past election, 76% of those referendums were voted in favor of because the value that people see in their public schools. Just wondering how, if you can comment a little bit on just your experience now after a few years here. How do you talk to people who are saying, we need to go to referendum? Why isn't the state doing what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, and I have been around long enough where I remember when Act 10 happened and the legislature, through that budget repair bill, took away $600 per student. And we've just not recovered from that, right? So Wisconsin public schools have just been asked to do more with less for far too many years. And when you think about just the cost of educating kids, I mean, we're a very human resources intensive, profession. And you also think about, for people who maybe own their own homes or have to do maintenance, things wear out. You're replacing roof, you have to put on new siding, you have to replace flooring. And our schools have had to do all those things and make choices without additional revenue from the legislature. And so therefore they've had to make up for that by asking local taxpayers instead. It's just that public education and that per pupil funding has just completely stagnated while the needs of schools have only increased.
I'm glad you pointed that out too. And Johnny Lupinacci is here. I know we made the announcement that he wasn't, but we got him back in. How you doing, Dr. Johnny?
Hey man, I'm doing all right. It's the final week of the semester here, and there's always not just fires to put out in our classrooms, but across the board. So a little bit tardy to class, but
That's all right. That's all right.
Nonetheless, you're learning nonetheless. And this is is so.
Yeah, you get a detention though. Dr. Underly is going to be
familiar to those.
He's there. But so the fact that too, to remind people, and I like the way you did that, Dr. Underly, pointing out that just general maintenance that we all do to our house, and then the reality of that those are what schools have to do, and to point out that when we're going to referendum, these are needs that haven't been
Hmm.
taken care of. A lot of people are like, oh, they're just voting to have them, some extras. And it's like every time we have done a show dealing with the
Hmm.
referendum, we have met people across the state of Wisconsin who are like, no, these are
Hmm.
funding requests for needs.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
some of these, in particular, when we're really doing the work with Milwaukee Public Schools, is that,
Hmm.
I mean, this is the difference between actually being able to offer a public education or not.
Hmm.
And so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And you think about like when you were talking about facilities and you brought up MPS, it was a couple years ago that the average age of a school building in the Milwaukee Public Schools was over 80 years old.
Mm,
And you think about in rural Wisconsin, that's very true as well. I mean, I can't tell you what it is. It's been a while since I think we've done a survey of buildings, but things wear out and the costs of things, construction costs, for example, go up every year. And plus there's things that schools need. I mean, you see many schools wanting to put on, secure entrances, for example.
mhm,
The cost of software to have doors locked or security or fire suppression. I mean, all of that costs money, and those didn't exist. Those expenses didn't exist 30 years ago. So it's really been hard for a lot of school districts to be able to figure out how they're going to pay for these things without cutting programming for
yeah.
kids.
Well, so that gets us to again, your announcement, the proposal. So it's $4 billion total reinvestment in Wisconsin
Mhm.
public schools. I was wondering if you can, walk us through how this level of investment would transform public education and even address some of those longstanding challenges schools have faced, especially regarding special education and revenue limits.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to really talk about this because really we have to reinvest in our schools and the future of our kids. I mean, and that's what this budget does. It tries to make up for all the past years of inaction. And so what this budget does, I've listened to lots of people. We held lots of listening sessions for strategic planning purposes, but people were very very forthcoming about what they feel their schools needed. We've also spoken to a lot of our different partner groups, like Wisconsin Public Education Network. We've had sessions with like the School Administrators Alliance and WEAC, and we've talked to different groups about what they feel the priorities are. And so I feel like this really reflects what schools need. So the big piece of this is the special education reimbursement rate. Right now, special education it's mandated, of course, as it should be. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when we pay for special education services in our schools, which includes things like speech and language, of course, the human resources and the teaching aspects of those too, hearing, auditory, physical therapy, other kinds of therapies, the state only reimburses school districts around 30%.
Hmm.
And so the school districts have to figure out how to pay for the remaining costs of those because we have to pay for that in full every year. And so, or we can't carry a deficit in that.
Hmm.
So the big piece of this is reimbursing school districts 75% in year one, which will be the first year of the biennium, 25, 26, and then 90% by 2027. We also are putting in money for revenue limit adjustments and indexing them to inflation. So, back before the Great Recession, our school districts did get revenue limit increases that were indexed to inflation. And then that was disconnected and has never been replaced. So, you can probably remember, just different biennium budgets where we're fighting over how much schools are going to get. Some years it's like an additional $50 per student.
Right.
It's pathetic and it hasn't kept up with inflation. There were the years during COVID where schools got zero increases. And that was a big fight because we got some federal money that was meant to respond to the pandemic for schools. And then our state legislature was like, oh, well, hey, we're not going to give you your increase in this budget because you're getting federal dollars,
Mm,
completely ignoring the fact that those federal dollars were supposed to address things that were coming out of the pandemic. So yeah, so that's exciting to make sure that we can restore that and index the revenue limit to inflation. We also put in things that are just meant to really support kids and families in these very crucial years of development. So
mm,
we're expanding access to healthy meals and
mm,
providing universal meals to students, breakfast and lunch. I mean, the fact that 1 in 4 high school kids have told us that they struggle with hunger and food insecurity in their own homes, it should be breaking our hearts, right? That
Right.
we live in one of the wealthiest countries in the whole world, and yet we struggle with this. And how can we expect kids to be their best selves and be their best learners when they're hungry? And so that's an important component of that. In addition to that, we're supporting youth mental health by meeting the critical needs of Wisconsin kids in our schools. And I had a roundtable session at Wausau East at the high school and talked to some incredible kids there about what they really want to see when it comes to mental health support in their school. So they gave us some really nice ideas. And then we have our Act 20 literacy, the bipartisan literacy bill. So we built in some budgetary items around Act 20 to support schools in improving literacy outcomes for early learning and early and just like the 4K, 5K, first grade, second grade in particular too. And then we have a piece that's addressing educator workforce
Mm.
and making sure that we can retain some high quality teachers. And then finally, one of my passions has been career and technical education. And so we put some money in there to support career and tech ed opportunities and programming for our middle school and high school students.
So lots going on there,
Yeah,
Johnny.
there
John,
is.
man, so much there, Johnny. Dig in, man.
Well, I mean, I was gonna ask Dr. Underly about the food stuff in the
Yeah.
budget that I really stood out, and in the mental health
Hmm.
aspect, the budget allocations for mental health, especially in our like teen and youth communities in our schools. But
Hmm.
you covered it. You got obviously, and
Oh,
so
well, I
but
can go in a little
yeah, if
more
you can just
detail if you want.
yeah, especially for our national listeners, right? I mean, this matters
Yeah,
to y'all in Wisconsin, and you're making it
yeah,
happen. And we talked about the Tim Walz efforts
yeah.
in Minnesota that got championed in the election
Hmm.
and things. And we had a couple episodes where we really talked about these fundamental things that
Hmm.
we often don't recognize our schools provide.
Yeah,
So yeah,
there's
go from there, Jill. Take it away.
Yeah. So there's like it's a whole gamut of things. Like nationally, when you look at it's not very many states, unfortunately, but it seems like it's just growing by the number of states that are able to provide universal meals to their kids. I mean, food is one of the most basic needs. Right. And yet, Wisconsin kids are telling us that they don't know when or if they'll have their next meal. And just kudos to the other states that have addressed this. And really, like, how can we expect our kids to thrive when they have, an empty stomach? There's the argument that, well, families should be able to pay for food, or, I could pay for my kids' lunch. So why should I expect the government to do that? I mean, I hear all kinds of arguments
Right.
for this, but the thing is, we provide a lot of things in our schools and we provide a lot of things in our communities that even if you could afford to pay for it on your own, it's part of being a public service. I'll just use school transportation as an example. We pick up kids with a school bus and take them home every day, even if their parents could afford to take them in a car,
Hmm.
right? If they've got gas in the tank or, if somebody's home to take them. And the reason we bring kids to school is because we want them to be there and we want them to learn and we want them to be successful. And we're trying to eliminate barriers. But yet we have so many hangups when it comes to food. And it's just like, come on, just feed the kids. I mean, they're growing, they're
Mm.
learning, they need this. And if we want them to be healthy and successful, just feed them. It's also a reason to get kids to school too,
Yeah.
just like providing transportation for them. And so it's just like we're long past due in addressing this. We also have a problem with lunch shaming. We still have lunch shaming happening in Wisconsin. And unfortunately, I mean, it's a national thing. It's not just in Wisconsin, but there are some states that have laws against it. There are some states that allow it. And Wisconsin's rather indifferent. We don't have anything on the books that prevents it, but we don't say anything if a school chooses to shame kids if they have
Just
overdue lunch balances.
Jill, describe that though a little bit more, like for somebody who's going, wait, what is lunch shaming? Mm.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it used to be things like when I was in school, like if you didn't have money in your lunch account, you just couldn't buy anything, or if you ran a deficit. And that's really what it comes down to is kids, if they have a deficit, like if they haven't paid their lunch bill, if their parents haven't paid their lunch bill, they will give them an alternative meal.
Mm.
Sometimes they're not allowed to get other things at the lunch. Sometimes they don't allow them to purchase breakfast because it's like you can't purchase on credit.
Okay. Right.
So like if you show up to school and you're hungry and they have a breakfast available, but if you have a deficit in your lunch account or your food services account, some schools won't let you even get breakfast. So it used to be things like back in the 80s and 90s when I was going through school where they would just put a mark on your hand, right?
Oh,
That said, yeah, or you got
jeez.
like, but that's the thing. It's like there's other schools might have policies like you can't go to prom or
Right.
you can't walk at graduation if you have an outstanding lunch account balance. And while, I mean, we don't prevent that here in the state, which I think is really callous.
Yeah, that's boy, that just made me think though too, and lunch shaming. You know what? I mean, I was one of those kids in the late 70s, 80s. My father lost his job and I found myself in the free and reduced lunch line, which in and of itself was enough
That's a
shame to
shame.
have
Yeah.
to go there.
Yeah.
And the reality then too that the school district would then come back to with with a mark on my hand that I owe money. And boy,
Hmm.
it's just like, yeah, to push that down. And then as Johnny pointed out, but there is though too, the kids do have these mental health needs. Let's not add
Hmm.
to that with the
Right.
shame with the shaming. But
Right.
if
Yeah.
if you could talk a little bit more though too about this the mental health commitments in this
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I think it's all related, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Mhm.
When you think about mental health, for me, it's a lot about inclusion and belonging and that sense of feeling as though you belong. And I'm a mom of kids. Both my kids are in high school, but I was also a high school principal. I was an elementary principal and as a superintendent. And when you look at the culture of the school and safety, you think about are kids involved in school? Do they feel connected? A lot of it has to go down to that sense of belonging. And mental health is a huge piece of it. We knew that there were issues before COVID with student mental health, like anxiety and depression in particular, but COVID just really magnified that for us and really put a spotlight on just how a lot of communities just don't have the resources, whether it's professionals to deal with it. In rural areas in particular, there just aren't clinics, there aren't professionals to speak to. And so one of the things that I was really proud to be a part of was the Get Kids Ahead initiative, which the governor introduced. I think it was 3 years ago now, but it was mental health grants to schools. And so we're really expanding on that idea.
Mm,
And his whole idea was let's get the services to where the kids are and the kids are in the schools. And as somebody who lives in a rural area, if there was a mental health emergency in our school and a parent, had to find resources for their child, they were driving, an hour and a half or further in order to get them help. And in northern Wisconsin, it's even more desperate as far as the situation is concerned. And so what we're hoping to do with this is that we're going to put more funding into making sure that this is a $304 million investment, but what it will do is it increases access to critical student mental health services by just making sure that schools have the right staff in the schools to address the very real challenges our kids face. A lot of schools don't have school psychologists. They maybe contract, for somebody part-time. We are understaffed in school counseling. And so, I mean, kids are telling us that they need these services. And so what this plan will do is it'll expand the school-based mental health services program and provides every school district in the state with $100 per student as well as a base amount of money so that they can at least have one mental health professional. And so of course if you've got more students, you'll get a bigger amount of money so that we'll be able to address the ratio of the professional to students. But I mean, kids are telling us that they need the help and our schools are in a place where they can, directly reach kids within the
right.
communities. I mean, let's provide the services where the kids are.
Ah, man, so much going on here, huh? Johnny, you're like, whoa, this is
I mean, I love it. It's like all things we talk about are that teachers or, guests on Busted Pencils are always saying, we really need to rally around supporting these kinds of things, especially when we've done so much talking about referendums and why
Hmm.
it's important to support our local school communities. Jill, what a budget. Thanks for the work that
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah,
How does
thank
Busted
you.
Pencils help? How do we
Yeah.
help? Because this is music to
Yeah.
our ears.
Oh, I appreciate that question so much. I mean, just keep telling the stories. I mean, these schools, when I'm talking to superintendents, there was a school district in eastern Wisconsin who passed a referendum, and they were very transparent with their community that it was all going to mental health. They had started with their COVID relief dollars. They started a school-based mental health program with staff, and like a student kind of peer-to-peer mentorship program. And the money was gone, right? After all the COVID relief dollars expired. And so what they did was they went to their community and said, look, this is the program that we ran during COVID. The money is now gone, and we're going to put it on the referendum. And it passed overwhelmingly. So it's like people know that what this is what the schools need. It's just that there's a lack of awareness, I think, about the struggles. And maybe it's just the financial struggles that schools go through. I think there's sometimes just this misconception that schools aren't managing their money well. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. And it's
Yeah.
because schools are just deprived of the resources they need to be able to provide the services. And like I said earlier, the services and the needs have just completely compounded, and you think about the things that schools have to provide now. So keep telling the stories, keep advocating for these things. Tell your listeners to speak with their representatives
Okay.
because they're the ones that ultimately will vote on this budget.
That was going to be my question though, too. And there's a challenge. I mean, it's this budget will have to have legislative approval in that sense. Yeah. And so when thinking about that, our listeners out there. So yeah, if you are listening to this, incredible episode with Dr. Joe Underly, and the proposal of a $4 billion public schools budget and the realities there too, to get this over the finish line, we're going to need those legislators to vote in favor of this. So if you're out there, man, make sure pick up the phone, send email, go to any opportunity you can to reach out to those legislators to let them know that you are in support of this budget. And
Right.
thinking about this, Jill, too, because we're pointing out that guess what? Whatever people are thinking about, this elected official versus that, we have seen across the country with this past election, particularly using vouchers as an indicator that where communities had the opportunity to vote for and or against, all across the country, people voted against vouchers in favor of their public schools. We had a great guest on who went into one
Mhm.
of those counties and interviewed the people there, and they said, you know what? Because we love our schools, we love our teachers, we love this. And so the reality of here, if you're thinking about this, going like, how do we support this, is to realize, okay, this is a support for your public school. And we
Mhm.
hear this time and time again, that if you're out there listening, or if you have somebody, a neighbor who really appreciates everything that goes on, this is that opportunity to say, pick up the phone, go to the email, go to the internet, put out a note saying we support Dr. Joe Underly's proposed budget. We want to see this happen because it's about time to put forward and, in fact, give our students what they need, give our teachers what they need. And you know what? Also, the communities, you benefit
Mhm.
directly from this. Joe, I was wondering, some parting thoughts from you, if you can give us, a little bit more here and kind of
Yeah.
spur, get everybody up and ready to go.
Yeah, so that's just like that when you were talking about the vouchers. I mean, these states, they defeated the measures on their ballots. They said no to vouchers. They at least had the opportunity. We in
Yeah.
Wisconsin didn't even have the opportunity. It was passed in the middle of the night and made into law. We didn't have a chance as the public to vote on it. And so there's that, right? But when you look at the support behind public education in Wisconsin, the passage rate of these referendums, people love their public schools and we have to invest in them. I mean, these kids are our future leaders in the state. They're just, they're our future teachers, our legislators, our parents, our business leaders. And what I think about is that, 30 years ago, when we were funding our schools well and we were funding our higher education systems well, we somehow got to a point where this current generation of legislators has decided to just pull up the ladder. So it's like they benefited from these kinds of, investments in education and public education when they were in school. And then when they were at the opportunity or when it was their chance to make changes and to make things better, they decided, no, we're going to just pull up the ladder and let everybody just fend for themselves. And so we can't keep doing that. We have to invest if we want to have a secure future and a thriving Wisconsin. And we really need to invest in kids through this budget.
Dr. Joe Underly, thank you so much for your time.
And now for your moment of zen. The reward for participating in a movement for social justice is not the prospect of future victory. It's the exhilaration of standing together with other people, taking risks together, enjoying small triumphs, and enduring disheartening setbacks together. Thanks for joining us for this awesome class in session today. Don't forget to catch the podcast every Friday. Free throws and face-offs. Listen to us on Civic Media Network every Saturday, 3 p.m. And don't be late for homeroom on Mondays. Always catch that podcast and keep busting pencils.